يا سيد أنا رجعت على لبنان، أتمنى أنك ترجع كمان على لبنان.
قرار صادر من مجلس الجامعة تسمية حزب الله الإرهابي.
Good afternoon, you're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's top stories. French President François Hollande in Lebanon meets with the Christian Maronite Patriarch Shaddai and various other figures at the residency of the French ambassador. Syria's ruling Ba'ath Party and its allies win a majority of seats in parliamentary elections across the government-held parts of the country. And Ecuador's strongest earthquake in decades, a 7.8 magnitude tremor strikes off the Pacific coast, killing at least 77 people. French President François Hollande is in Lebanon. He met with Christian Maronite Patriarch Shaddai and various other figures at the residency of the French ambassador to Lebanon, the Pine Residency in Beirut. During the last day of his two-day visit to Lebanon, Hollande also attended a military ceremony with French members of UNIFIL stationed in the country. He laid a wreath of flowers on the war memorial of French soldiers who died in Lebanon outside the Pine Residency. And he said that France would provide immediate additional military aid to Lebanon and urged politicians to end a long-running crisis by electing a president. He also said he had decided to step up assistance for Syrian refugees in Lebanon, giving 50 million euros this year and pledging another 100 million euros over the next 3 years to cope with the crisis. Lebanon hosts more than 1 million registered Syrian refugees, a quarter of its population. Continuing on his tour, Hollande also concluded his trip where he met with senior officials and visited the Syrian refugee camp in the eastern Bekaa region. In the morning, he held several talks with Maronite Patriarch Shaddai and later Army Commander General Jean Ahwagé. Adai, for his part, reiterated during the meeting the need to elect a president to fill the vacuum that has persisted since May 2014. He handed the French official a memorandum on the situation of Syrian refugees in Lebanon, the presidential vacuum, and terrorism in the region. For his part, Hollande said, France only has one candidate for the presidential elections, and it is Lebanon. Lebanon has been without a president since May of 2014, when the term of Michel Sleiman ended without the election of a successor. At least 7 civilians were killed in Syria's second city of Aleppo, an activist said, in one of the highest single tolls since a fragile truce came into force. Nearly all warring parties in Syria, the government, rebels, extremists, and Kurds, have carved out zones of control in the war-torn northern province. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which relies on witnesses on the ground, 6 civilians were killed, 8 wounded in government airstrikes on rebel-held eastern parts of Aleppo. Opposition groups fired rockets into the government-controlled western districts, leaving 5 dead and 20 wounded. Brokered by Russia and the United States, the cessation of hostilities deal does not include the fight against Daesh or al-Qaeda's local Syrian affiliate. The truce had largely held across parts of Syria since late February, despite frequent accusations that both sides were committing breaches. And Syria's ruling Ba'ath Party and its allies won a majority of seats in parliamentary elections across government-held parts of the country, according to the National Electoral Commission. In a widely expected victory in polls labeled a farce by Syria's opposition, President Bashar Assad's Ba'ath movement and its allies ran under the National Unity Coalition and won 200 of the parliament's 250 seats. Syria's National Electoral Commission published the names of all candidates who had won seats in the April 13 vote, according to Syria's state news agency. Every candidate on the 200-strong National Unity List has won. Syria's government and opposition are in Geneva this week for UN-backed peace talks to put an end to the violence. The talks are aiming to lead to a political transition, a new constitution, and fresh presidential and parliamentary elections by September 2017. In other regional news, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows that Israeli-annexed Golan Heights are forever going to remain in his country's hands as his cabinet holds its first meeting in the territory. Israeli media has reported that Netanyahu planned the cabinet meeting in his statement amid fears Israel could come under pressure to return the Golan as part of a future peace deal for its war-torn neighbor. Saying it was doubtful that Syria can return to what it was, he urged the international community to recognize Israel's claim on the territory. Israel fears Lebanon's Hezbollah could establish a front against it along the Syrian border, and that militants linked to al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group could also pose a threat. Israel seized 1,200 square kilometers of the Golan Heights from Syria in the Six-Day War of 1967 and later annexed it in a move never recognized by the international community. 4 Yemeni soldiers were killed in a suicide attack on a checkpoint near the international airport in the city of Aden, home to a growing jihadist presence. Yemen has been rocked by more than a year of fighting between Iran-backed rebels and pro-government forces supported by a Saudi-led coalition. Jihadists have exploited the unrest, with al-Qaeda and Daesh strengthening their presence in the south, including in Aden, which is serving as a temporary capital for the government. Both groups have claimed several attacks against the army and government installations in the port city. On Friday, a car bomb exploded in the port city near a building housing the foreign ministry, without causing any casualties. Daesh claimed responsibility for the attack and also for a suicide bombing Tuesday in Aden targeting army recruits that killed 5. Coming up next, The Jungle Book tops the box office with over $100 million on its opening weekend. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Ecuador's strongest earthquake in decades, a 7.8 magnitude tremor, struck off the Pacific coast, killing at least 77 and causing damage near the epicenter, as well as in the largest city of Guayaquil. President Rafael Correa declared a national emergency and urged the Andean nation's 16 million people to stay calm. Authorities urged people to evacuate coastal areas for fear of rising tides. Alarmed residents streamed into the streets of the highland capital, Quito, hundreds of kilometers away, and other towns across the nation. Local media showed images of rubble-strewn streets and fallen power lines. The government said the death toll would likely rise and damages were serious, especially in the western coastal areas nearest the quake and Guayaquil. Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton held a campaign rally in Los Angeles while visiting California for fundraisers. She also took the time to praise the City of Angels as she criticized Republican frontrunner Donald Trump.
I'm very excited that California is increasing the wage repayment guarantee for families that take time off for a new child or for a sick relative. I want to see that happen across America. California was the first. New York has now passed a plan. Let's take California values and New York values and put them to work for American values. I am personally so unhappy and upset at the kind of language that we're hearing from the other side. Demeaning Mexican immigrants, hardworking people. You know, when Trump calls people who work hard, probably work hard in some of his own businesses, calls them criminals, that just sets people against each other. When he goes after women, all kinds of women, that is also a signal to pay attention to. When he goes after Muslims, we know that he's playing to the basest of our instincts. So we have to figure out how to unite our country, and what better place to see that in real live action than right here in LA, right here in California. We're going to work hard in California. The primary is on June 7th. Please, if you haven't already, sign up to be part of our campaign. Find ways that you can reach out to people. Vote by mail starts on May 9th. A lot of people, particularly the elderly and others, they're going to want to do that. So think about who you know and how you can help them have their vote registered and counted. And I can't wait to be here campaigning in this great state. And I want you to know this. If you will work for me, vote for me, stand up for me, not only in June, but in November, I will spend every day in the White House standing up and fighting for you. Thank you.
Actor-turned-director Jon Favreau brought Disney's 1967 classic The Jungle Book to life. a movie that has soared to the top of the box office in the U.S., grossing over $100 million since its opening 3 days ago. Blending live action with computer-generated imagery, Bill Murray, Ben Kingsley, Lupita Nyong'o, and Scarlett Johansson are among the actors lending their voices to the film. But the star of the show is a 10-year-old, Neil Sethi, who was picked from 2,000 children around the world to play Mowgli, the raised-by-wolves boy at the center of the film. Critics have praised the movie for its mix of live action and computer generation, and Favreau says he thinks audiences will love the animated creatures. Take a look.
Interestingly enough, Disney was less concerned about sticking to the animated film than I was. They felt that this was an opportunity in live action to draw back upon the Kipling and build out a world that was inspired by those stories, but could be its own thing. But I grew up with that '67 film, and I was always trying to steer us back towards the way the characters were introduced, what they represented, the way the music was included. Sometimes I didn't want it to be a musical.
Poor, sweet little cub. What are you doing so deep in the jungle?
You are a man cub who wants to live in a jungle.
How do you know that?
Kid, I got ears. My ears got ears.
Only I can protect you. Forget about your worries in a strain.
What's that?
That's a song about the good life.
Sometimes I didn't want it to be a musical. I certainly didn't want it to be a G-rated kids movie, but I did feel that there were moments and that there were sounds and there was ways to tap into the memory and the emotional depth that I think a lot of us who grew up with this movie feel as it relates to images or songs, and I didn't want to leave that on the table. I wanted to really explore that while never letting that limit what we could do with a film that was more geared towards adventure and taking full advantage of this photoreal look that we were going.
It's this strange odor today. What is it? This scent that I'm on. I almost think it was some kind of man cub.
Once you adjust, you kind of forget about it and could watch the movie, and it doesn't get in the way. But it does allow us to do things that was difficult to do before this technology existed.
You don't remember what happened, do you?
No.
I saved your life. Yeah, I snatched you from the jaws of death, the coils of death, if you will. And lucky for you, your new favorite hero, Old Blue here, just happened to be passing by. No big deal. Just tell me this. Can you climb?
Movie making is, it's trying to find excellence within your own team. It's not about worrying about what other people are doing. And as soon as the release dates separated far enough from each other, it became a non-issue. And allowed us to just concentrate on what we were doing and not worry about if we were going to overlap with each other. And enough time's going to pass between them that I don't think people will confuse the two.
Never forget this. You're mine. Mine to me. No matter where you go or what they may call you, you will always be my son.
And the simplest answer as well is I just didn't like how it felt at the end of the movie when I was growing up, and this was an opportunity to change that and to make it end in a way that I felt was more appropriate closure, and by the way, leave room if we end up telling more stories for what happens when Mowgli encounters the man village and characters in it. And that was certainly covered extensively by Kipling, and I'm sure we could draw inspiration from that as well.
Come on, Mowgli, let's be on our way.
But I'm helping Baloo get ready for hibernation.
Bears don't hibernate in a jungle.
Not full hibernation, but I nap a lot.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. French President François Hollande in Lebanon met with Maronite Patriarch Shaddai and various other figures of the residency of the French ambassador. Syria's ruling Ba'ath Party and its allies won a majority of seats in parliamentary elections across government-held parts of the country. And Ecuador's strongest earthquake in decades. 7.8 magnitude tremor strikes off the Pacific coast, killing at least 77 people. This wraps up your weekend headlines here live on Future Television. Have a good week ahead, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.
بقول له يا سيد انا رجعت على لبنان، اتمنى انك ترجع كمان على لبنان.